The Bible, God's big story. A rescue plan underway. Lesson 4, God chooses a people.
How did things go for Adam and Eve after God made them leave the Garden of Eden?
Adam and Eve and their children did continue to reflect God's image, but they also did a lot of things that were wrong, that hurt God and each other. Their son, whose name was Cain, killed his own brother, Abel. People's sin got worse and worse until God sent a flood to destroy almost everything on earth. But God chose a man named Noah to preserve his creation and his people. Even after the flood, people continued to sin. They thought they didn't need God and even tried to build a tower to reach up to heaven.
Is this when God saves his people?
No, but it is when God sets his rescue plan in motion. God chose a man named Abraham.
What did Abraham do?
God called him to journey to a new land. God then made a covenant with Abraham. God promised to give Abraham the land he was in and told him his family would bless all the people of the world.
Was Abraham the Messiah? That rescuer that God had promised?
Abraham was not the Messiah, but one of his descendants would be. Generations later, Abraham's descendants left the promised land and moved to Egypt. After many years, the Egyptian leaders forced them to work for them as slaves.
That sounds like a good time for the rescuer, the Messiah, to show up.
God heard the suffering of his people, and he sent Moses to lead his people out of slavery. God also gave Moses the 10 Commandments, rules for how God's people should live.
So was Moses the promised Messiah?
No, but he would lead God's people back to the land promised to Abraham. After returning his people to the promised land, God chose a young boy named David to grow into a great king and warrior to lead the nation of Israel.
A king? Was he the Messiah?
No, but a descendant of David would be the Messiah, and through the Messiah, God promised that David's kingdom would last forever.
Whoa, that's a big promise.
After David, there was a long period of kings in Israel.
Were any of them the Messiah?
Some were God's servants and followed God's laws, but other kings chose to do what they wanted, and they led the people away from God.
Did the people totally walk away from God?
Many did, but not all of them. But soon, empires from far away took over Israel. They forced many Israelites to leave their homes in the Promised Land.
Oh, that sounds horrible. That can't be how God's story ends.
No, but God's people felt like the story was over. They suffered in foreign lands. They became hopeless. They wondered if God had broken his promise to send a Messiah.
So the Messiah hadn't come?
Not yet. God continued to love his people by sending prophets, preachers like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, who told the people they were in this mess because they had turned away from God.
Did God break his promise?
No, he didn't. Through the prophets, God also told the people that he would bring them back to the Promised Land and finally send the Messiah they were waiting for.
That's good. No more waiting. The Messiah is coming.